Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Andy, and welcome to this week's Team Kentucky Update, where we hope to have a shorter agenda than normal. But let's start out with a recap of an exciting announcement yesterday. Yesterday, I joined U of L Health to celebrate the hoisting of the final beam of the South Hospital in Bullitt County. Healthcare is a basic human right. And this expansion of healthcare is going to make these services more accessible to people in this region. It is great news for families across the Commonwealth, and for residents of Bullitt County, it's going to save lives. The new U of L Health South Hospital will provide life-saving care and treatment for all of the people that come through its doors. But it's also important to emphasize that while healthcare is a basic human right, it's also a basic building block of our economy. The expansion of U of L Health is another in a long list of economic development successes and investments in the healthcare industry that are creating really good jobs. The South Hospital will add approximately 100,000 square feet to the existing U of L Health facility there when it opens. It's going to bring 100 new jobs into Bullitt County. The healthcare industry is one of our leading employers. It has created 1,550 new jobs. That was in 2022 alone. This past year, we've also announced other great expansions to major healthcare facilities. There's the Norton Healthcare's new hospital in the west end of Louisville, first hospital in that area in over 150 years. There's the Appalachian Valley Autism Center in Prestonsburg and the institution of the PACE program, which can allow seniors to stay in their homes longer, receive incredible care, improve quality of life. We've been trying to get that program going for 20 plus years as a state government, and now it's active in so many of our communities. So the completion of U of L Health South Hospital adds to our growing list of healthcare expansions and our growing list of economic development wins. Thank you to U of L Health. Next, recovery-ready communities. Applications are now open for counties across the Commonwealth to apply for and become certified as recovery ready through the Recovery Ready Communities program. One life, just one life lost to drug overdose is too many. And we must continue to commit ourselves to doing everything we can to help those that are suffering from addiction. We've got to make sure that we have adequate treatment facilities. I actually had one of the major providers in the state tell me that they think right now that Kentucky is number one per capita in treatment beds and opportunities in the country. I hope that he is right. We have seen significant and rapid expansion, especially as those services became Medicaid eligible. But remember, that's only part of it. Now, treatment starts, we hope, a process of recovery, which has its own challenges from transportation to housing. By applying for certification through this program, communities will have their services measured in three categories: prevention, which is always the best answer; treatment, necessary for those that have fallen into addiction; and recovery. That's making sure once people get well, we can keep them well, get them back with their families, get them in a good job. This evaluation gives communities the opportunity to identify and close gaps in addiction treatment and service programs. This will help us fight addiction, while at the same time not just saving, but truly restoring lives and ensuring that there are opportunities to get help in every community across the Commonwealth. The Recovery Ready Communities program is the latest step we are taking to fight the drug epidemic, and I strongly encourage local counties to apply by visiting the link on the screen right there. This administration has been committed and will remain committed to fighting this drug epidemic. It's a task that I took on first as Attorney General, where after watching what opioids had done to our communities, I filed more lawsuits against those companies than any other AG in the country. And we're starting to see those dollars come in. So I think it was last week or the week before that I signed the emergency regulations to get those dollars that go to our counties out there in the first tranche so that they can begin the healing process in their communities. We also launched a program to help employers guide their workers to addiction services when in need, because when someone is falling into addiction as an employer, the best thing you can do is get them help, not lay them off. Give them the opportunity to get better. And again, the earlier we can intervene, the better our possible outcome. In a bipartisan effort with the General Assembly, we've expanded recovery ready housing as well as access to treatment for pregnant and parenting people in rural areas. We also expanded on the benefit of Casey's Law by allowing the court to determine if an individual should be ordered to undergo treatment for a substance use disorder. We provided tens of millions of dollars of grant funding to programs across the state, and our law enforcement out there continues to do a great job with Kentucky State Police and the Warren County Drug Task Force making one of the largest meth busts just weeks ago. 80 pounds, almost unheard of for one single bust. I'm very proud of the work that they're doing. But you know, part of it also falls on us to make sure that when we see somebody in need of help, that we reach out and we get them to reach out. Remember, folks suffering from addiction aren't nameless, faceless people. They're people that we know and care about. They're people we go to church with. They're people that we work with. So if you or someone you know is battling addiction, there are resources, including calling the Kentucky Help Call Center at 833-8KY-HELP. That's 833-859-4357. There's also Find Help Now, ky.org, for information about available space in treatment programs. We're actually working to expand on this by launching a tool which we have on recovery housing. We don't nearly have enough, but as you're coming out of treatment, if you're in need of recovery housing, we need to make sure we have a similar tool about where beds are and where they're open, where there's space for you to go to continue to get services, peer support, and other needs. And finally, you can visit the Kentucky State Police website where they're ready to help. If you go in yourself asking for help, that's a place that you will be paired with a local officer who will assist you in finding the appropriate program. All right, we have an update on the Healthy at Home Eviction Relief Fund. After providing dollars for more than 2 years to keep people safe in their homes during the height of the pandemic, the Team Kentucky Healthy at Home Eviction Relief Fund will expend all of its available funds provided by the federal government here in the near future. Team Kentucky has already nearly exhausted the federal funding awarded to the state because by this point, we've now helped 52,738 households with nearly $205 million in rental assistance and more than $23.5 million in utility and internet assistance to help keep families in their homes. We've also been able to provide Louisville with $92.2 million of additional funding to assist their programs, and Lexington over $46 million to help with its program. All the remaining dollars from the federal government are in other programs like those to help the homeless or in new building of housing, especially in areas where we lack it. But this program has been a big success, getting significant dollars out there. But like a federal program that's designed for a specific period of time, at some point the dollars do run out, and they run out if you successfully expended them to help as many people as possible. All right, Eastern Kentucky flood update. Next week will mark 6 months since that historic flooding took 44 lives and destroyed virtually everything for thousands of Kentuckians that emerged with only the clothes on their back. Listen, a lot of work and a lot of progress has been made, but there's a whole lot more to do. Let me repeat that I think this is going to be the toughest rebuild that this country has ever seen from a natural disaster. The lack of insurance monies, the challenge with the terrain and the need to move people from a place of danger that will flood again into a higher ground community. These are real challenges. But listen, if we can push back on a 1 every 100-year pandemic, we can do this too. And the way we do it is together. So giving a FEMA update, FEMA's now approved $95.4 million in aid And I say this every week. This is up $628,613 from last week. Each of the last 3 weeks, there's been at least $600,000 of additional awards provided to FEMA. So please do not give up. People who have had claims in the queue for a long time are finally seeing dollars, and you can too if you keep pushing. So since January 11th, an additional 3 applicants have received the maximum grant as well. If you need help, you can call FEMA at 800-621-3362 or visit a multi-agency resource center. Commonwealth Sheltering Program. We think we're starting to see some real stability in this program. We are actually down to just 3 pending requests. And what this means is for people's intermediate housing, it's really stabilizing at this point in the Eastern Kentucky area. That does not mean people have found permanent housing going forward. We still have a lot of work to do there. But what it means is that we've had, just since last week, 6 households transition out of the program. Those are good numbers because that means that they have found a more desirable place for their family than in one of the travel trailers. And this is, while we've had more people in travel trailers, this is the same in the East as compared to the West. It's the same general trend where you see the increase and then ultimately people finding other options. 249 travel trailers currently occupied. Kentucky state parks are now down to 28 people being housed in lodges or cabins. That's down from 360 on September 1st. 26 are at Jenny Wiley, 2 are at Carr Creek. I can't say enough about our Parks Department. I doubt any of them joined our Parks Department thinking that they would be providing housing and meals and help and emotional support to folks who had been through the worst when they signed up for that job. They have done a stellar job being there for their fellow Kentuckians. I can't tell you how proud I am of all of our parks employees and what they've done. On transportation, 3 additional bridge replacements have been completed since last week. Of the 1,100 bridges inspected, 100 were found in need of repair. 29 have been replaced, 14 have been repaired, 42 temporary crossings are up, and we are getting close to 500,000 tons of debris removed. We're at 490,000 tons of debris removed as of today. Still sitting at about $13.1 million in the Team Eastern Kentucky Flood Relief Fund. Donations are still going to be needed. My hope is that we're getting close on announcing additional high ground communities. And as we move into especially the longer term permanent housing mission, there's going to need to be more help out there. So please, if you can, help out with that fund. All right, an update on Department of Revenue offering tax filing assistance. As we are now well within the month of January, we all know that means that our taxes are going to be due in the coming months, filing them. And I want to share some information about getting free help for filing your taxes through the Department of Revenue. Each year, the Department of Revenue partners with the IRS to operate what they call volunteer income tax assistance sites. At these sites, knowledgeable staff provide free tax filing assistance to eligible individuals, families, as well as Kentucky state government employees. The free service is generally available to help individuals with an annual income of $60,000 or less. So if your annual income as an individual is $60,000 or less, you most likely qualify to get free assistance from the Department of Revenue and the IRS in filing your taxes. The window to schedule an appointment is now open. It opened this week. In-person assistance will be offered on Tuesdays and Thursdays from February 2nd to the 13th. Last year, more than 1,500 returns were prepared and with this help and then filed at no cost to the individuals. So if you believe you qualify, this is a heck of a service. Being able to talk to either DOR or the IRS to get assistance in filing your taxes. You can find a list of all the regional taxpayer service centers at the Department of Revenue's website, which is on the bottom of the screen. All right. Um, Another update on the Department for Juvenile Justice. As I've been discussing the last several weeks, my administration has taken uh, quick and decisive action to make our juvenile justice detention centers safer, and we're going to announce more today. But if I can, I want to start um, because we've been talking these last several weeks about just one specific part of the Department for Juvenile Justice, which are the detention centers and really pre-adjudication detention centers. That's where all of our challenges are. But just to show you a bit of a chart on all of the different types of facilities. Nope. There you go. The Department for Juvenile Justice operates much more than just the pre-adjudication detention centers that we're talking about. Um, those are the ones on the left, but then they run youth development centers, group homes, and day treatment centers that see many more youth throughout the course of the year than just the juvenile detention centers. And this is important to note because the mission for the Department of Juvenile Justice is much bigger than simply pre adjudication detention. And much of the services that we talk about or think about wanting to provide to youth that are in the criminal justice system, most of those are actually provided by a facility other than a juvenile detention center. And the reason is this is pre adjudication. So these children, these juveniles, haven't been found guilty of their crime yet, and so there's a limitation in what you can talk to them about because typically represented, they're always represented by counsel. So in many ways, the pre-detention juvenile detention centers, the best analogy is jail, though we certainly try to run them differently than that. So let's talk, though, specifically. All of our changes that we're talking about and the challenges that we've seen are at the regional juvenile detention centers. So, in the last several weeks and over the last several months, we've made what I believe are the most significant operational changes in the DJJ detention centers since their inception nearly 20 years ago. The model that they had operated under before these changes had been the same for more than 20 years. That model for the first 20 years had taken any and all juveniles to the closest regional center, regardless of the offense that they had committed and regardless of their gender. And so, what that meant is that you had boys and girls in the same facility, and you had those that have been charged with capital murder next to someone that's in for contempt of court or for truancy. What we have seen in recent violent episodes at these detention centers is that changes had to be made for the safety of both the staff and the population, and that the population has certainly changed over time, in part for good reasons. There was a Senate Bill 200, I believe it was, that thankfully removed many status offenders from our facilities. But what that meant is if you go back over 10 years, the lower level offenses were the majority 10 plus years ago. And now the higher level offenses are the majority of the individuals in our facilities. So, steps we have taken is that the Department of Juvenile Justice opened the first female only detention center in Campbell County in December. Right now, I think with one exception that has certain special needs, we do not have girls and boys housed in the same facilities. And for the first time in Kentucky, male juveniles are now separated by security level based on the severity of their offense. What that means is we no longer have a facility where somebody who's been charged with capital murder or an A or a B felony are sharing a facility with someone that is in for a Class A misdemeanor or a status offense. Those charged with serious offenses are now housed at one of three high security facilities. They include Adair County, Fayette County, and Warren County. And the other male juveniles, 14 or younger than 14, or with lower level offenses, are in Boyd County, Breathitt County, Jefferson County, and McCracken County. We believe that this provides more safety to everyone, to the staff, and to the youth. It allows, especially at those lower level facilities, for services to be provided without disruption. Because what would happen, leading to many of the complaints about foods or showers or the education piece, is one of our higher level offenders would cause a disruption in the facility that would result in a lockdown. That was the only way to provide for the safety of everybody in there. But if a parent's waiting and there's a lockdown, they might miss their appointment. It was a real challenge with especially the disruptions to the lower level offenders caused by many of the higher level offenders. Now, placing the higher level juveniles charged with the higher level crimes in a higher security facility should also provide better safety for them and the staff with a more structured environment and with additional resources that we can bring in. One additional resource that's being provided right now, especially in Adair County, is the Kentucky State Police is visiting it daily, and the Department of Corrections is providing certain services as well. So, number one, we have a female-only detention facility for the first time. And two, for the first time in the history of this program, we have different levels of security in our facilities. By the way, both of those were suggested by numerous folks, including the former Chief Justice of the Kentucky Supreme Court. Something that maybe hasn't been covered as much as to date, we have provided at least 2 raises to the workers in these detention facilities. First, the administration provided a 10% raise. Second, the last budget provided an 8% raise on top of that. Last piece that we have already announced before some new ones we're going to talk about today is we're working to expand the DJJ transportation branch, because the way that this will ultimately work will not cause any additional disruption to local law enforcement. They will eventually be able to take a juvenile to the closest detention facility, and then we will handle the transportation from there. But we had to immediately provide for better safety and security, and that means we got to catch up on the transportation side. So we ask people to have a little bit of patience. We're going to make sure we resolve the situation, but I know everybody's primary goal is safety of the staff and of the juveniles. So today, we're announcing some additional plans to move DJJ into the future and to improve juvenile justice and its system for years to come. So first, today, I'm announcing that we are raising the starting salary of DJJ workers in detention centers to $50,000 annually. We are ensuring that youth workers in detention centers will now be reclassified as correctional officers, and that will help in that raise. We can make that raise work under our current budget, but in part, that's because of our vacancies. So we will be asking for help from the General Assembly moving forward to meet the staffing levels that we have to meet in the future. And we need that salary to get there. So we will need help from the General Assembly as we amplify our staff and hire more. But our hope is that this will improve retention, help in the short term in hiring, and get us on the path to ultimately having the staffing that is needed in these facilities. Second, we are currently making substantial improvements to the physical facilities designed to enhance security. We'll be announcing some of these, but given that they are security in a detention facility, some of them we won't be able to announce to provide for the best security and safety. Third, for the first time in Kentucky, we're making defensive equipment available to DJJ's youth workers who before now have had no equipment with which to defend themselves or to defend youths when attacked. Fourth, we're training DJJ staff concerning the use of that equipment. It's not enough to just provide it. We have to make sure people are properly and adequately trained, and also training on the identification of threat groups within the facilities. Next, and we believe this is a big one, we are hiring a director of security who brings deep experience in operating secure facilities. That person is former Department of Corrections Warden Larry Chandler, who is going to serve as DJJ's Director of Security. This is a big win because Mr. Chandler brings 33 years of correctional experience, having served as the warden of 6 Kentucky prisons. Mr. Chandler is assisting DJJ right now by visiting especially our high security sites and making a series of suggested changes, both that we can make in the short term and those that we can make in the long term. And as being someone who has seen some of those draft assessments, his experience is already providing significant help. Next, we're creating a compliance division to ensure that best practices are identified and followed. We need to make sure practices from one facility to the other are similar in the high security and in the lower security, and that we don't have different practices and rules other than best practices, and that they don't depart from each other from facility to facility unless there is something within the facility, like the physical plant, that would require it. Next, we are going to reorganize the department itself by function to better manage the current challenges facing detention facilities. And as we mentioned, we're creating a robust transportation unit to mitigate the burdens on local law enforcement. We're also procuring equipment and training personnel to better prevent the introduction of contraband into these facilities, better screening when individuals enter to make sure we prevent dangerous items and or drugs from getting into the facilities. And these are part of this, but we are going to be making or requesting a wide array of legislative, regulatory, and policy changes designed to enhance the safety and security of DJJ facilities. And as part of that, we're going to be rationalizing the detention footprint by initiating the process of design and engineering to construct potentially up to 2 new state-of-the-art facilities. Many of these buildings are older than DJJ's model itself, that were serving other purposes before they were set up. And you can just look at some of the incidents and know that the buildings weren't designed especially for the function and the population that they now serve. We will be working with the General Assembly, the work group, any of the committees. I think we're receiving questions from 4 or 5 to make these changes, to request the needed funding, and to do so in this session. So we will continue to have updates, but I hope what people see is nobody's running from this, right? This is a challenge and a problem that needs to be fixed. These facilities need to be safe. The juveniles need to get the services that they should be getting, but to do that has required real serious and significant changes, given that we are currently housing a more violent population, and that's both through experience about what has happened in the facilities, but also the breakdown of those we're housing when you look at by the charge that has been leveled. All right, public health update. The flu is somewhat declining, but it still remains at an elevated level. Get your flu shot. It works against the strains that are out there. It's still worth getting the flu shot now. RSV activity continuing to decline, which is good news. COVID-19 is increasing in the United States, but we in Kentucky are still not seeing a substantial increase. I actually got to listen to an update by Dr. Stack to county judges the other day. He's pretty pleased that if we had a post-holiday bump, that it was very small. And that is a testament to vaccinations, to treatments, to at-home tests, about how far we have come. But unfortunately, current data from the CDC indicates that only 12% of Kentuckians 5 years or older have gotten the new booster. We believe the new booster is safe and effective, and that it provides very significant protection against severe illness or death for those that get it. And we believe that it is effective even against the newest variant that we are learning more about as we go. Finally, our Team Kentucky All-Stars. This week, I'm excited to name the Louisville Orchestra musicians and staff as a Team Kentucky All-Stars. By sharing their musical talents, this group brings joy to every part of their city, but now they are embarking on a tour throughout Kentucky. They're going to start by playing in Mammoth Cave. This is one of the wonders, natural wonders of the world. I believe the longest cave system in the United States and North America. And they're going to have a special guest, Yo-Yo Ma, That's going to happen right here in Kentucky. It's going to be pretty special. But not only that, they're then going and they're touring so many different communities in Kentucky. And if there was the universe telling us that something is right, it's doing it here. Because, see, the Louisville Orchestra was founded 75 years ago after a major flood in Louisville. Now, the first place they're going after Mammoth Cave is Eastern Kentucky, an area that has seen a significant and devastating flood. I can't wait to see what comes out of this. I was asked, what do we think that say music education those in our schools will get from these performers? I said both. The performer and that student are going to get a lot from each other. All right. We'll open it up for questions. We got Carolina and the latex here today. We'll start with Carolina.
Governor, I know you've been pushing your agenda when it comes to education lately. The legislature, some of the leaders in the legislature have indicated they have no desire to reopen the budget in a non-budget year. How do you propose working with them? What's your plan to work with them to get some of these things that you want done?
Well, the legislature is and will reopen the budget this year. You cannot fund the Veterans Nursing Home in Bowling Green, which we all want to fund, without reopening the budget. It will absolutely be done. And if we want to address the DJJ situation, we need them to reopen the budget to provide some dollars for capital improvements and others. You will see the budget reopened. Now, the General Assembly may try to rationalize, well, maybe we'll cut some over here when we're providing funding over there. The budget's still reopened, right? They are rewriting what our expenses are and how much. And by the way, we have a new forecast that says we will have $2 billion additional dollars above and beyond what we budgeted for by the end of that biennium. So our goal is to continue to bring pressure, to continue to talk about this issue. As you've seen, we're going around the state. Taking this not just to an office in Frankfort, but people's communities that are so impacted by it. But in the end, all we're asking is for people to do the right thing. Right? Our teachers fell from being compensated 42nd in the country to 44th this last year. Some, when you look at the last decade in terms of inflation, have lost almost 35% of their compensation. And almost everywhere, when you account for inflation, earnings overall have dropped. That means we're asking our teachers to do a tougher job with less money in their pockets. So our goal is to work with anyone and everyone who will work with us. But just look at the numbers: $2 billion additional dollars. Us falling in teacher pay. Indiana, with their Republican governor, talking about raising average teacher pay to $60,000 a year, and that being one of his key pushes. I mean, it's necessary for competition now. Yesterday, we were in Louisville and listening to the educators talk. They said two things that really stuck with me. Number one, this is a competition for talent. That in all of our colleges that have a school of education, there are districts from across the country now, not just across their state, that are trying to recruit these people. Well, if we're 44th in teacher pay, how many are we going to get? And with 11,000 teacher vacancies, if any of these legislators are serious about addressing learning loss, we have to have a teacher in the classroom to do that. So we'll continue to talk to anybody who's willing to talk to us. But let me also say there's no magic wand to get the General Assembly to do something. It's our goal to push, to put out our values, to advocate for what's right. It's ultimately their responsibility to do what's right. A lot of this is, well, they won't do the right thing, so how can you make them? Well, the responsibility's got to come down to those that have to take that vote to do right by our people. And all they got a disadvantage. So if we believe in competing, we like to compare ourselves to all other states. We're doing that. They're doing that with the income tax. Well, let's look at teacher pay too, because we're competing on that side. And when we look at for talent, the need for universal pre-K. Tom Latek.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon to you. How many people are we shorthanded? What's the number of employees we're shorthanded in juvenile justice? And secondly, do you have any idea how much it's going to cost to do the upgrades to facilities and build new ones?
Well, we'll be coming out with a specific number that we'll be asking the General Assembly in terms of the additional hires that we need to make at the higher salary, as well as the upgrades. The transportation division is also new. So it's going to be significant. It will be in the tens of millions of dollars that we will need to make swift and significant changes that provide for more safety in these facilities. I'll get you the number. Our vacancy rates have been significant. I think that they've approached carry 40+%. That's just the vacancy rate in those positions. Anna Latek.
Thanks, Governor. I know, like the rest of us, you've been monitoring the situation in DC with the debt ceiling having been reached, and now there's conflict between the White House and Congress as to how they're going to address the situation. What steps have you taken and has the state taken to sort of watch out and, aid some federal programs that may end up facing some financial difficulties on account of this budget freeze?
So we're carefully watching the debt ceiling. I would say debate. I'm not sure there's much to debate. The debt ceiling has always been raised when it's been reached. It was raised 3 times under the last president and multiple times before. When it's something that's routine, and remember, this is just what we owe. So there's a group of folks in DC that are saying that we shouldn't raise the ceiling and default on the debts that the United States government made a promise that it's going to pay. Well, I was raised that when you give your word, it's your bond. And whether it's the U.S. government or me personally, when you have committed, when you've contracted, when you've given your word, you follow through and you don't try to negotiate some way out of it. And in many ways, for the economy, this is like negotiating with someone, or you drive them off a cliff, and you absolutely can't do that. So our hope is it gets resolved. We know that there are some steps being taken that may push out the kind of the final date until June. And so we will continue to push. Now, out of some of our federal delegation, you hear a lot of the right things. Out of others, you hear the desire to get something in exchange for not driving off the cliff. I personally don't think anybody, any country, ought to be doing that. All right, Al Cross, Kentucky Health News.
Thank you, Governor. As you know, the Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission, supervised by the Attorney General, is nearing decisions on how to allocate these hundreds of millions of dollars from opioid settlements, but they don't seem to have any guidelines for laying out that money. And one of your appointees, Van Ingram, is on that commission, and he recently expressed concern that they don't have any guidelines yet. Do you share that concern?
I do. Van Ingram is a stellar human being. He has dedicated his life and certainly his public service to battling the opioid epidemic, and he has served through multiple administrations. He is a voice when he raises concerns that we ought to listen to. The opioid crisis, I mean, it has devastated so many of our communities. And because of that, I filed more of these opioid lawsuits than any other AG in the country. And that's where these dollars are coming from. Cases that I filed, and I personally argued many of them in court to keep them in court. Sadly, I haven't been asked about how we ought to be spending these funds, but certainly any process where there is an application for government funds has to have guidelines, has to have scoring criteria. Virtually everything else, how you know this, think about the procurement process and the rest, have those in place. And it is a great concern that they have taken all of these applications without giving organizations, here's the scoring criteria that will be used. So my hope is that we'll see some major changes. This isn't about me or anybody else in office. This is about wanting to make sure that this money, which is blood money, is used the right way, is used the smart way. And if they don't come up with criteria, how are they going to tell all the amazing organizations that there might not be enough funding for in this round? Why? Remember, these are saints. I mean, most of these organizations are filled with saints, with people who have gone through addiction many times and relived their own trauma just to help other people. Now, they're going to need an explanation about why one thing was funded and another wasn't early on. Now, with that said, let me say something positive. I have heard from both Van Ingram and Eric Friedlander that the town halls were productive, had a lot of great ideas, got to reinforce kind of where we've been and where we're going, the need for recovery housing and transportation being major issues that have been raised. John Cheeves, Lexington Herald Leader.
Thank you, Governor. The defensive weapons for the juvenile justice workers that you'd mentioned earlier, can you be more specific? I think earlier it was you, among others, who were talking about tear gas and tasers. The kids are going to see this soon enough, so you don't really need
No
to
one
keep
has
it a
ever,
secret
whoa, whoa,
from them.
no one has ever said tear gas. No
Oh,
one
forgive
has
me. I'm
ever
sorry.
said tear gas.
Pepper spray.
right.
Pepper spray. I apologize. Pepper spray.
That's right.
It doesn't feel very
That's
good either
right.
way, but pepper spray and tasers. Is that what we're talking about, pepper spray and tasers? And as a quick follow-up, given how frequently the keys and the radios get lifted off the youth workers' belts by these kids during some of the incidents, is there any concern about giving them weapons which also might get taken off their belts during incidents? Thank you.
Well, John, I think saying that people get overpowered, so don't give them defensive options. You give them defensive options so they don't get overpowered. We can't continue where we are right now, which is our DJJ staff being injured and injured on a regular basis. And every corrections or other security official, when they've come in, said, of course you have to have these workers armed with at least some defensive weaponry. What we have ordered primarily right now are pepper spray that will be carried, especially in the higher security facilities, by these workers with significant training that we are going to ensure that they have. Tasers will be located inside of our facilities, but we're looking at the policy of when and where they are carried as opposed to being there if necessary. Right now, when we have a major incident, all they can do is lock down, possibly not even intercede when there is a violent altercation because they don't have the ability to do so safely and wait for the state police or others to arrive. But we'll get you the full list of what we are looking at. We're also looking at training teams like the CERT teams that are in our prisons. When there is a major incident, we have to be able to establish order quickly. That's the way that you prevent violence from occurring. But when we have some of these juveniles that are awaiting sentencing on such serious crimes that they are either going to be in a juvenile facility or most likely an adult prison for 5, 10 years or their entire lives. It is a challenge keeping order when they understand you don't have defensive weaponry and they understand what tactics you have or don't have to establish that order. Ensuring the safety of our workers is the only way we have enough workers. And then ensuring the safety of our workers is the start to ensuring safety for the juveniles as well. Certainly the two levels of lower level and higher level security give us some flexibility about what's required in each one. But let me just say, as a former top prosecutor and top cop in Kentucky, there's a big difference between pepper spray and tear gas. Krista Johnson, Courier-Journal. All right, we will get Krista's question from her and get them answered. Okay, we went just a little bit shorter today. Thank you all. We'll be back next week for another Team Kentucky update.